Welcome to a small group of us to Majority Rules, our little podcast about Mizzou Athletics Majority, which is Olympic sports athletes. As you can see, we do have a smaller group with us, despite the fact that we didn't record last week. I guess everybody decided in their off week that they're like, you know what? I'm done with this whole podcast thing, guys. Just kidding. We'll have some updates from them to add in. People are busy with school and work and being sick and I know all that sorts of stuff. I still am coughing. The grass is green. The sky is blue. So anyway, I'm Karen Steger. I'm your host. I'm also the oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm the gymnastics, softball, and swimming beat writer at Rock Nation, as well as the Olympic sports manager. And to my right, whoever would like to go next.
I am right on the right. My name is Dylan Heinrich. I am currently the soccer and women's basketball beat writer and first man off the bench for the softball rotation. So very much in a busy time of year and a busy time episode.
And I'm Matthew Gustafson, the volleyball, wrestling, and co-baseball beat writer, along with doing just kind of whatever else people tell me to do around here. Yeah. And I was going to say, given that you started coughing again, we should absolutely do superlatives at the end of this season. And I can already tell you yours will be most likely to cough on a episode of Majority Rules.
It's true. It's true. I even bring fluids to the podcast every time, and it doesn't help. I think it's that sometimes I spend my days at work and I don't really say anything. Yeah. So then when I start talking a lot, then it's like, eh.
Mine will be most likely to go off on a tangent about a useless fun fact.
Something about Chicago or Illinois or
oh, got him.
We love you, Matthew. Your fun facts are fun. They are fun. So let's get started here. We have some women's basketball news, but we are actually going to start first with talking about the last couple games for Mizzou women's basketball, where we experienced some deja vu. Dylan, what would you like to tell us about that?
Mizzou, I'm going to take you back. Mizzou played Tennessee on February 2nd, which for anyone keeping track is Groundhog Day, which is very fitting because this entire month has been a Bill Murray tributes. It's the same game every time, including this week where Mizzou has a good first half. They're either close in the game or they're actively in the lead. Something happens at halftime. Maybe it's like Space Jam and they get all their power taken away. The third quarter sucks. And then the Tigers, either in the fourth quarter, kind of shrivel away into the loss, which is what happened against Oklahoma just over a week ago. But they've also been known to fight back against teams like Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee. But for the most part, the team has just come up short one too many times. They've played some tough opponents. There's no doubting that. All of these teams that they've played and lost to are going to make the tournament, are probably going to be a top 6 seed, and may even host a round or two. So it's not like they're blowing leads against bad teams. These are good teams, but when you're up by 10, 15, especially when you see that third quarter clock, feels a little bad when you watch the other team go on. I believe in Ole Miss, it was a 29-11 run in that third quarter. Woof. So, again, it's been more of the same games. They had a big win against A&M 2 weeks ago, but other than that, it's been more rough sledding for Mizzou, which is why the big news of the day comes as no surprise to anybody.
What news? I didn't hear.
I guess for anyone who is living under a rock, Robin Pingeton is officially stepping away, as the athletic department puts it.
Stepping away.
Was the last year on her contract. It was announced that she will not be returning next year and that her duties will be done by the end of the season, which means Mizzou will be able to go immediately into that coaching search, which is really helpful if you want to pick up some of those top candidates. But it was reported, I believe, by Power Mizzou that I saw that even out of last year with Desiree when she was still around, that she was probably towards the end of her deal. If not, the plan was to fire her last year. But as a result of the AD changeover and just a lapse in schedules and the fact that it was the last year on her deal, athletic department kept her around. There was no certainty as if she was going to be gone by the end of this year, but it's been another really tough year. The energy quite hasn't been there for most of it. And so now
I'd argue that when they decided not to extend her last year, that they basically were like, it's over.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was anything she could have done this year. Cause I think Gabe at Power Mizzou said something like, it's not even that her seat was hot. Like there was no seat. Like her seat was just gone. It was known that she was going to not be there anymore.
I mean, maybe you could argue if they made like a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 run, things change all the time. But once you got to that first games against like Vermont, Norfolk State, and those end as losses, you're like, okay, we kind of know where this train is heading. We've reached our destination, even though we've got at least 3 games left this year, maybe 4, probably not more.
Well, and like how this whole situation came about, we kind of already knew that this was a foregone conclusion. Like what has this team or this coach shown us in the past like 3 or 4 years post Sophie Cunningham years to make us think that this was going to go anyway but down the pipes. I'll say that in a nicer way.
Yeah, I mean, I was not around for many of the early years, but you look at it, you're consistently in the win column, upper half of the SEC, eventually into that 3 through 5 range with Sophie Cunningham. You're making the tournaments, advanced to the second round a couple of times. And then again, as soon as Sophie leaves, it just all falls off a cliff. Again, there were still some really good players who came through the program. Asia Blackwell, Haley Frank, Mama Dembele. These players, they came through the program. Some of them stayed with the whole time, but players like Blackwell, Dembele, they moved on to greener pastures, as I put in today's article. And so, yeah, it was just, some of it was talent, but a lot of it, I think, was coaching for the most part. Even the fact that you have Sophie Cunningham, who was a monster in college, and you can't make a Sweet 16, and there were consistent problems with her team.
And there were pieces around her too, of like people who are making a career playing overseas now, like Amber Smith and Jordan Frericks. Like they are out there professionally hooping, not in the W, and then they still couldn't do it.
I mean, hindsight is 2020. The one thing I will say is, spoiler alert, Mizzou women's basketball, not the most historic program dating back to forever ago. So what Robin Pingeton was able to start to build, and when they locked her up in the middle of those Cunningham years, it felt like there was something brewing. It felt like Mizzou had a chance to turn into a consistent contender. And then just as soon as Cunningham left, the wheels fell off, just couldn't buy a tournament appearance anymore. And we're just struggling when it came to SEC play. Those turnover issues, struggling to get talented bigs and keep them around, like those all became more and more prevalent year after year, to now we're in the situation we're in now, where they have 4 conference wins over the last 2 years. Yikes.
Yeah. So they have tomorrow at Arkansas. Do we think they win tomorrow at Arkansas?
I think so. I don't think this news is really going to affect the team that much. I don't think Robin is just going to phone it in because this is now made official. Because I know in the contract,
I'm sure they all know. I'm sure they knew already.
I'm sure that this was not a decision made. What's today? Wednesday morning, as released to the press Wednesday afternoon. This has probably been brewing, and the players probably knew it for a couple weeks now. So I think the team is still going to give the same amount of effort. They've been playing pretty good basketball. Like on the surface, this team looks like a team that would be right on the bubble of the NCAA tournament, record aside. So they should take care of Arkansas. Obviously, Izzy Higginbottom, ex-Mizzou player, funny enough, has really matured over in Fayetteville and is probably going to look to put up 40 against Mizzou. But I don't know if the rest of Arkansas can put up 30. So I think that'll be a big question.
I forgot about her. I mean, I didn't forget about her. Like, I remembered that she transferred, obviously, but like the reasons behind her transfer were more like, I want to go back and play in my home state, not this team isn't going anywhere, so I'm going to get out. Because she went to like Arkansas Pine Bluff or something first, or Arkansas State or something like that. She started at a smaller Arkansas school and then ended up at University of Arkansas. So that's,
I believe it was Arkansas State.
something like that. Yeah.
And then you've got Vanderbilt on Sunday, which tournament team, Michaela Blakes is a beast as a freshman.
Is that the 55-pointer girl?
55 one day, 53 another.
That's insane.
Yeah, just a generational scorer for Robin Pingeton's last game at Mizzou. Then you've got the SEC tournament. Depending on, you're playing on day one no matter what. Mizzou could jump up to right around that 12 or 13 line, give themselves a more manageable matchup. The last thing you want to do is lose out, be that 16 seed, then you're probably going in against like Tennessee, Mississippi State, or Vanderbilt again, which is a recipe for disaster. But if you can play one of these teams like an Auburn, maybe a Texas A&M, maybe get a lucky draw with Georgia, I could see them winning one game on tournament day with a favorable matchup. But once you get into those single bye teams and you're looking at Kentucky, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
I can't remember who else is in that list. I think Ole Miss is somewhere in there. Now you've got your problems.
So you're saying win against Arkansas, lost to Vanderbilt, win one game in the SEC tournament, and then it's over.
I'm an optimist, so yeah, I'll go 2 more wins for Robin Pingeton on the way out. Gets that SEC tournament win and bows out gracefully into that good night.
What do you think, Matthew?
1-1, first round exit.
Okay, 1-1, then they lose the first round in the SEC tournament. Okay.
Given the last few weeks, like I said, they've been noticeably better. They also have just had this.
They have to play the third quarter, though.
Like massive fatal flaw, and it almost didn't matter against Ole Miss, but you miss a golden opportunity late. I said it just the team. There are teams that know how to win, and there are teams that don't know how to finish close games late. And this is one of those teams. So I think that if you get in a close game late in the SEC tournament, it's probably not going to go Mizzou's way. One thing I will say, just a fun fact, because that's what I do here. I may definitely will have to try to get to the last game of Pingeton era, because my first ever Mizzou basketball game, Mizzou Georgia, final game at home with the Kwanzaa Martin era.
Oh.
Which was an interesting,
my favorite coach,
all-time classic coaching matchup of Kwanzaa Martin and Tom Crean at Georgia.
Gosh.
That seems like a decade ago, doesn't it?
It does seem like so long ago.
What, like 3-4 years? Yeah. So, but yeah.
I cried when Konzo got fired. I knew it was coming. I still cried.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those.
I was very attached to him.
There are coaches who are, not the best on the court, or things don't go their way, but they're phenomenal head coaches. They're leaders of, men or women leaders of programs off the court, which makes it tough. But in the end, you got to do what's right. And I think similar situation here with Pingeton, just overall, she's been a solid leader for the program, but it's time to part ways. It clearly has not been working the last few years. And if Mizzou wants to be relevant again soon in the SEC and women's basketball, they've got to find the right head coach. And Robin Pingeton, at this point, is not that head coach.
Agreed. So that kind of leads us to what Dylan's working on.
Yes. Before I get to that, I will say, on that note, I was around the beat for 2 years now. Nothing but pure respect for Robin Pingeton as a person. Always treated media with great amounts of respect. Was more than accommodating to take some extra time to come talk to me. I remember for my Haley Frank story especially. So I will say nothing but respect for the person of Robin Pingeton. And of course, wishing her all the best in whatever's next, because she did not claim retirement or anything. It's up in the air. So,
well, and I will say about her is that I heard, like when Blackwell left, there were like rumblings of why, and there were issues within the team, but from everything I ever heard, and Asia said it herself, that like the problem was not Robin, like it was the people above her kept her from being able to do what she actually wanted to do, and kind of made it this untenable environment for certain populations of people. We'll just leave it at that.
Anyways, getting back on track, I do have several articles in the works. In addition to, general recaps. I think we got two more hooping it. No, just one more hooping and hollering. Tournament. Sad. But anyways, I will shout out because it is.
So we could pour one out for the end of basketball season. Next time we can.
With senior day coming up, I am writing a feature on Delilah Brown, who may or may not be playing her last collegiate basketball game. The transfer rules around JUCO are still very much up in the air, but she has a very fascinating story about her time playing in Florida JUCO, which I'm super excited to tell.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe she's not done.
We'll get into that a little bit later. That article will be out by the latest Sunday morning. After that, the one that everyone is excited about, coaching search. So we've gone ahead here at Rocket and we're starting to put together the list of candidates that we're potentially looking at. There will definitely be some in-depth coverage, but at some point, probably right around the end of the season, unless Karen thinks otherwise, we'll give out our full list of what I would say are the top candidates. I believe the list
tomorrow. Just kidding.
Not tomorrow. Yeah. But the current list we're looking at is about 15 coaches, which hey, I'd rather have more than less. So not everyone will probably even be in consideration for the job, but I think it's fun to throw around names, and it just gets you more familiar with especially mid-major women's college basketball, because there's some really good coaches and some really good teams out there.
Now, I think as a teaser, you should tell the audience what your tiers are.
Yes.
So I really like them.
I have 3 tiers. 3 tiers. The first tier, so first of all, these tiers are not based on coaching ability for the most part. They're just based on fit, likelihood that Mizzou could get these people. So category number 1, these are your slam dunk hires, a basketball. So these are your ones that the region makes sense. They've been in the right amount, the right level of basketball for the right amount of time, and would probably have interest in moving to Columbia. Number 2, these are going to be your contested mid-ranges. And these contested mid-ranges, maybe they don't quite have the experience. Maybe they just are from really far away, and so it might be a little bit of a push to try and convince them to come to the Midwest for no connections prior, or they've found previous success in their role. And then number 3 are your half-court heaves. So these are your coaches who are extremely talented, but they may have just been hired by their recent program. They may have just signed an extension, or they might have been at that program forever, are a little bit up there in age. So for whatever reason, these coaches might not be as willing to make the trip to Columbia, or might not be as well sought after. But I think we're starting to put together a really good list. So I'm excited to share my findings with everybody.
I am going to challenge you right now, because in the offseason, I did a midseason portal update for Mizzou Volleyball, and 2 of the 6 players that I listed ended up going to Mizzou. What are the odds, you think, that the actual
And Mizzou gets 2 head coaches? 0.
No. Although, I mean, you never know. I mean, given over a span of time, it's always possible. But odds that the actual future head coach is on there.
You know what? I will say 40%, because
40.
you know what? I don't know how much about the politics, about what Laird Beach is looking for in a coach.
That's
All
fair.
I can do
That's fair.
is say, these are your best coaches across mid-major basketball, and to my knowledge, anywhere else outside of that frame. I have very little knowledge of any old coaches who might want to come back to the game, anyone who they might want to promote from high school, which is something you see more at mid-majors, but you never know. So
anybody they want to bring in from the WNBA?
The hire Sophie Cunningham? No. Stop.
I was thinking more along the lines of, I told you this, that
Yes.
like why not talk to Simone Augustus at LSU and tell her, come to Mizzou and your clipboard won't be harmed.
I'm limiting my search almost exclusively to people who have previous head coaching experience, just because it's an easy one to fit. I mean, again, Robin was a head coach at Illinois State. Dennis Gates was a former head coach at Cleveland State.
Yeah.
Mid to low major to high major head coach is, again, it's a slam dunk hire most of the time. So that's where I'm focusing the majority of my search. So there may be some great other coaches who are assistants, but they're kind of flying under the radar. So I haven't been. So It's kind of harder to narrow and limit down. And plus, it's just kind of hard to find them because there's so many assistant coaches who may be qualified for the job. There's only 1 head coach per program, and there might be like 3 that are qualified from, say, an LSU.
Associate head coaches or
North Carolina, something like that.
Well, if you hit the nail on the head, we'll congratulate you. If you don't, we'll get to that when we cross that bridge. Anyways,
I'm kicked off.
I do think there are like a couple of really super obvious candidates, though. I mean, we were talking about that before we started.
Wait, before you say that obvious candidates, though, let me ask my question of the day, because maybe this will be part of maybe this will factor into whatever your answer is for the obvious candidates. So my question of the day is this: if you could pick 1 criteria to choose Mizzou's head coach, what do you consider the most important factor to be in choosing Mizzou's next head coach?
Proven prior success. Now, that can look like a couple of different things. For example, it can look like coaching at a very high level and having success with those teams, coaching at a mid-major level, making the tournament 1 or multiple years, success as being one of the best programs in the conference for a couple straight years. It can also look in the form of, if you're an assistant, both success in terms of helping the team on the court and also being a proven recruiter, somebody who is recruited at a very high level.
Like a CY.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're an assistant, that's what I'm looking for, be one of the best recruiters in the country, be on one of the best programs in the country. And if you're a head coach, I want somebody who's been to the dance before, who's had sustained success at least one, if not multiple levels.
Okay. Dylan, what about you?
I will say that is a pretty easy answer. Coaches who win usually make good coaches. Not breaking any new ground here. I was probably going to say something similar.
We're not trying to hire losers.
And that's definitely where my list is going. But if you wanted another criteria, I would say play style. You're looking for coaches who like to use perimeter shooting, who like to run the break, aren't afraid to use a press, especially on the defensive side, because when you look at when Mizzou is at its best, Sophie Cunningham, Haley Frank, even now Grace Slaughter and Abby Schreck, they love to shoot from the outside. They haven't been a team that can consistently compete in the SEC down low, but if they're knocking down their outside shots, if they're putting pressure on you, they're forcing steals, then Mizzou's going to hang around all day long. I mean, that's a large part of what makes this Dennis Gates team so successful is they're just going to pressure you on ball all the time. So I think a coach that can come in and implement that sort of high energy, high motion style that isn't afraid to, again, tell your players, we're going to set up, we're going to shoot 25, 33s a game. And if we're going to make them like we know we have the talent to do, then we're going to win a lot of games. So I think that sort of run and gun style is something that Mizzou has benefited a lot from in the past. And I think that sort of idea with a similar philosophy could lead to success and get the most out of players like Grace Slaughter, Abby Schreck, Ashton Judd.
And I'm going to say that mine is the ability to recruit at a high level. Like I want somebody who can go shopping in the portal and pick up some freaking talented people. Like a post player, for instance. Like I need somebody who has some CY level recruiting chops and can go out there and just get people out of the portal and convince them that like playing in the SEC for Mizzou is what is going to be best for them.
I think something that has hurt this program is also the high school recruiting. We don't talk about it as much, but these last 2 years have not been ideal. Obviously, you get Grace Slaughter and Ashton Judd the years before, Abby Schreck, but so far in the last 2 years, 3 recruits, none of them bigs. So, I mean,
we haven't seen London or Mariah.
Those are, of course, injuries and you can't control it. But even then, they still weren't highly ranked recruits. They could come out and surprise everybody, but these last couple of years have just been I don't know if I could call it a disaster from a high school recruiting perspective, but it's been pretty rough.
And the thing is, like, there's a lot of talent around Missouri in the Midwest. You're getting maybe 2-3 recruits from Missouri in the top 100 pretty much year in, year out. You look at I think Paige Beckers is from Minnesota. There was a 5-star that went to UConn in the class of 2024 from Wisconsin. So there's enough talent around the area that you're set up for success at Mizzou with recruiting, right? And I think overall, looking at the situation at Mizzou, you can have success here. Mm-hmm. And I think that with a solid program, you will get the fan base to buy in. We've seen it with we've seen it with the other Olympic sports, right? Where softball is all consistently in the top in the nation in attendance. Volleyball, except for the dark ages, aka the Josh Taylor era, was consistently in the top 25 in attendance in the nation, right? So Mizzou fans will show out for these Olympic programs that are having consistent success. And I think that they could get over 5,000 fans a game pretty easily for women's basketball. You just have to start winning to get them there.
And they want it. I mean, they'll come even when they're not winning. 2 years ago, I wrote something for Rockham about the older fans who populate the games mostly and talk to a bunch of elderly-ish people, older folks, about like how long they'd been season ticket holders or why they were women's basketball season ticket holders or what about the women's game, is so exciting to them. Like they just want better basketball. Yeah. And a lot of them still have their season tickets, even though it's not going well. But I could just see you get a new coach in there, you get some fun, like Quentin, is asking for just some fun basketball. And maybe people who haven't had season tickets for a couple years, maybe they come back now.
And I think something really big is going to be getting the
What's on
buy-in from the
basketball?
students. Because like student sections this year at women's basketball were non-existent.
Non-existent.
Nobody would show up, right? But I mean, you've seen the student section can get pretty rowdy, for volleyball. You get a lot of students who show up, go out to the berm for softball. So it can happen. It can definitely happen in, wrestling too. Every once in a while they'll get a fairly decent amount of students. So, you can definitely get that student support, especially, looking at, the men's team and how they've been filling up the student section. So you get a good women's team in there. And I think the student section, it'll be easier to fill up the student section of women's basketball than even some of the other Olympic sports.
I mean, you look at like around the SEC, they constantly sell out arenas. Like
Yeah.
South Carolina, LSU, Texas, parts of Oklahoma, Kentucky. When these teams are good, if not great, they're filling up that student section a heartbeat. Because again, it's not really so much a men's versus women's. It's, is the team good and are we going to have fun? And if Mizzou can do that to even like half a degree that the LSU women's team or the South Carolina women's team or even the Mizzou men's team can, boy, Mizzou Arena is going to be electric for years to come.
I also think that the marketing department needs to do a better job of trying to get students to games.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel like they've done, and that's been a concern for years, because when I wrote that piece about the older fans, Abigail, before pre-Rock M days, used it for one of her StratCom classes to figure out plans on how basketball could increase its attendance at women's games. And that was like one of the things that they looked at. But then like also they were trying to give them plans for things that they like, tangible things that they could actually try to get more people to the games. And it's 2 years later and it's worse.
I will say the marketing department for a lot of the Olympic sports, they know how to run a good promotion, like volleyball and gymnastics, especially. Good promotions just rocket that sport up, especially those FSL nights that they do, which I mean, we'll talk about it a lot more, Karen, but gymnastics was an incredible atmosphere. So it's, again, there will be interest.
That it was.
It's it's gonna be a joint effort from everybody, but I think again, primarily getting just a jolt of electricity into that program, which a new coach should be able to do. I think we talk a lot about transfers and recruiting, but I think honestly the most important thing is keep your pieces in Mizzou, because it's not really a huge talent problem like we've seen at Ashton Judd, Abby Schreck, Grace Slaughter. I mean, Lanai Randall.
Those top pieces to stick around.
Yeah.
What year is Lanai Randall?
She is a senior, so unless
I couldn't remember between her and Nia Wilson if both of them were on their final years.
Both, I believe. I'm not like, again, now that they're like phasing out the COVID years and stuff, I'm just gonna assume everyone who's a senior is out of eligibility, like the good old days. So I mean, your primary
I couldn't remember if I knew Angie was done. I figured DeMilo was done. Yeah, I didn't know about Nia or Lanaya, but I was like, oh, if Lanaya still got eligibility left, that's big, because she's been a really bright spot.
Yeah, but I mean, there should still be plenty of returning talents. I mean, you look at what situation Dawn Sullivan walked into. Like, that was a program that had Jordan Iliff already, but then you add someone who's just a firebolt like Maya Sands, and it's a perfect combination. So you're looking for your new head coach to not only keep and capitalize on the current talent, but also bring in some of those electric pieces, either from their own program or being able to be attractive to other people who are interested in coming from the portal. So.
Well, and I think that that's a way that the new coach can kind of sell it too, is that like, we got plenty of playing time available. Like there should be plenty of opportunity to try to get in on the floor at an SEC program and help rebuild it to what we hope that it can become.
If you are a mid-major center that is averaging 15 and 7, boy, do we have a spot for you.
Join us.
Hi Rockham, my name is Abigail and I'm the cross country and track and field beat reporter for Rockham Nation. Okay, I wanted to give you guys a quick preview heading into SEC indoors, which kick off probably today if this is posted on Thursday, February 27th. So the Missouri Tigers men are ranked 23rd in the nation heading into SECs and 15th overall in conference, while the women are lucky number 13 in the conference. Neither team will be competing for a team title that is all but locked up by Arkansas. Arkansas's men and women's program have swept the title the past 5 consecutive seasons, and the women have not lost the team title since 2012. Never fear though, Missouri has several opportunities to bring home some individual medals, the best of those coming from Jonathan Surime. Jonathan Surime, men's triple jumper, holds the top 2 men's triple jump marks in the nation. In fact, his season best 16.94 meters is almost 0.2 meters farther than the next challenger from Oklahoma. If he wins, he will become the first ever men's Missouri triple jumper to win an SEC championship title. There was one competitor who took silver from Missouri in 2022. Christy Perez-Sneeman is kind of right on the cusp. She stands solidly in position for bronze potential. It's going to be challenging for her to take silver or gold behind Georgia's and Arkansas's top high jumpers for the women's high jump. However, she definitely has been improving on her jumps each meet, and it'll be exciting to see what she can do face-to-face to the best in the conference. Sam Inez is also in bronze potential for the men's weight throw. He holds the school record set on January 25th. He has not had 2 great meets since then, but he's solidly within 3rd place with definitely some margin of error between him and the 4th place competitor if we're comparing personal bests. Effany Andre sits 4th in the SEC conference right now for the women's triple jump. She is the reigning SEC outdoor champion, but is going to have a hard time reclaiming her title because Winnie B from Oklahoma State transferred in, and she has a much higher season best as of right now. We also have several top 8 contenders. Sterling Scott, reigning bronze medalist. Right now, what won him bronze last year in the men's triple jump would rank about 7th in the conference. So the men's triple jump event, led of course by Surime, has just continued to improve this season and going to make it a little bit harder for him to find the podium again, but definitely in contention for a top 8 finish. The Tigers will compete Thursday through Saturday down in College Station, and I will bring you all the updates live for Rockin'. Thanks, guys.
I do encourage everyone to go to rockmnation.com and read Abigail's tracketology. God, so clever. She was like, it's the title's more clever than the actual writing, but whatever. She doesn't do herself justice. I find the way that she writes about track to be extremely exciting. I love it. So yes, go ahead to Rockham Nation and read Abigail's tracketology piece, because the SEC indoor championships start tomorrow, I believe.
Yep.
At Texas A&M, I believe is where they are. So I will then move on to swimming. I took over some swimming duties for the SEC championships. My spreadsheet got a lot of highlights on it. Highlights mean a lot of best times, you guys. So even though, spoiler alert, the men's and women's swim teams did not win the SEC championships. I know, we're shocked. They did. However, I think have a really good meet. So both teams finished 10th. Last year, the men finished 8th out of 10. This year, they were 10 out of 11. Yeah. And the women finished 10 out of 13. And last year they finished 10 out of 11 or something like that. So there's some progress there, especially on the women's side. But as Coach Grievers has told us all along, the goal of the program was never to like go to SEC championships and compete for a team title. Like, it's just not feasible against teams like Texas and Florida. I mean, Florida was like having their own sort of SEC dynasty, and then Texas comes in and rips it right away from them. Sorry, Florida. The Longhorns are here. But some good things from this meet. Couple of relay teams got NCAA cuts. I did want to bring up the weird one in it, in that the oh my gosh, what relay was it? It was the 200. Was it the medley or? I can't find it. Oh, the 200 free relay. So each person swims a 50 free. The men's team took 8th in finals, but missed the A cut. So the A cut's the automatic qualifying time. That's the one that you want. They swam a time trial 200 free relay later and then made it. So that, like, that's kind of crazy the way that happened. And also that they swam the second fastest time in school history. So that's pretty cool. Also I'm trying to scroll. I should have written down all these things ahead of time. I'm trying to scroll through my highlights. The way I wrote it on the site was like, here's my day 1 and day 2 highlights. Here's my day 3 highlights. Let me see. 200 medley relay. The women had just missed an NCAA cut, so I'm wondering if maybe they will try to swim it to make it this weekend at the last chance qualifier meet. The men's team in the medley relay swam a B cut. The cool thing about that is that Grant Boczynski, the senior, led off 50 backstroke, broke the school record in the 50 backstroke. For relays, the person that goes first, their times are actually like counting times because they're the only people that have a standing normal start. Otherwise, no one else's times can count because you're able to anticipate the other swimmer coming in. So you're leaning over and trying to make it as close as possible and not get disqualified like the 800 free relay team did for the guys. Whoops. Yikes. But yeah, that was really cool that he broke the school record with a 20.77, which is faster than some of them swim the 50 free. It's faster than all of the women swim the 50 free on the Mizzou side, but also faster than some of the other guys on the team swim the 50 free. He swam a 50 back that fast. So that, pretty crazy. My race of the meet was probably the women's 200 IM. Carolina Bank went under 2 minutes. That's 2 laps of every stroke: butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, freestyle. She went a 1:58.10 in prelims. That was the 6th fastest in history. She is just a junior. She won the consolation, the B final, with that time. So a bit of background on the A cuts and the B cuts. So I come from a swimming family. My dad officiated a bunch of college meets, and I sent him like this spreadsheet, and he was like, "Oh my God, the A cuts are so freaking fast." Like, just unreal how fast you have to be to qualify for this. It blows my mind. Like, I'm like, I don't even I don't even understand how they're doing this. So Mizzou did not have anybody make A cuts in individual events. There are people who are kind of close in a couple of individual events for the top part of B cuts. So the way it works is that they will allow 32 men and 41 women in each event. If more than that have an A cut, more than that can swim. So like say 40 something people make the A cut in the men's 50 free, all of them can swim. But say only 22 make the A cut in the men's 50 free. Then they could fill the next 10 spots with the fastest of the B cut people. So the goal obviously is like, you want to be at the top of the B cut range. So that is what I'm hoping for
Do you know
happens.
about what percentage of people that make the B cut end up qualifying?
You know, I actually looked that up and I could not find it anywhere. Like I looked on SwimSwam, I looked on Swimming World, like I looked at all of the swimming sites to try to figure out exactly how many people normally make it, just to kind of figure out the odds, and I could not find it anywhere. I would guess less people swim races like the 400 IM, the 200 backstroke, the 200 butterfly, 200 breaststroke, things like that. The mile, probably.
Yeah.
So I would say those longer races, as opposed to the sprints,
You're gonna have a
might have a higher probability
just
of,
because less people. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, because you're gonna have less people make it.
Yep.
That's why, like, I didn't swim in college, but I was told if I went to Mizzou and wanted to walk on, that I would need to swim the 200 fly, which is a very difficult event. But because that is an easy way to score points, because a lot of teams don't have a group of 200 flyers. That's an easier way to score points in conference, because you oftentimes don't have a lot of people that want to swim that, or the 400 IM, which I think is the worst event ever. I love to watch it. Swimming it, fate worse than death. I'd rather die. I think I swam it twice in my life. Maybe once. I know one of the times my goggles fell down when I dove in and I immediately quit. I just stopped. Like I was like, there's
Honestly,
no way.
That's the correct reaction.
Yeah, I wear contacts. Like I wasn't gonna lose my contact. Like I was like, there is no way in the world I'm finishing this race.
No.
I'm a terrible person. 400 I am. Don't wish that on anybody. And then on the women's side, all four have made it in the 1 meter and the 3 meters. There'll be Gabby Carmona, Megan Henniger, Megan Jolly, Olivia Liddell, and Mia Henniger all made it in the 1 meter and the 3 meter. And then Mia and Gabby have made it in platform. So they will all for sure be at that meet in Iowa. I don't know what the likelihood is that they will extend past that, but Collier got 4th in platform at SEC's, and Tommaso got 5th. So that seems pretty good. And that was amongst some very good diving schools. And then on the individual side, Jan Zubik, who I know that Rory has talked about at length, is probably the closest as anybody between a B cut and an A cut in the 200 butterfly. So I'd watch out for that. Grant Boczynski is decently close in the 100 back, but the 100 back, I have a feeling there's a lot of people who, considering that he didn't even make the A final, there's a good number of people ahead of him. Lena Bank also dropped a bunch of time in the 100 breast. I already talked about the 200 breast before. She also dropped a bunch of time in the 100 breast. So I don't know how feasible it is for her to have another like pretty big drop, but she's pretty close between the B and the A cut. Relay wise, the men's 400 free relay is within 0.4 of a second of the A cut, and the 200 medley relay is within 15/100ths of a second. So good work by them. It was fun to just stare at Meet Mobile all weekend to see how people were doing and then like update my spreadsheets. Good times. Good times. From here, we'll go to wrestling. Matthew, thoughts on the Iowa State match and predictions for the conference meet.
Iowa State, much closer than the previous two meets, right? One important caveat, Iowa State was without 3 of their starters who were all ranked wrestlers. Obviously, that may have had a change on the final score, but Mizzou loses a close one, 21-18. 3 of these matches were decided by 2 points or less. Iowa State won all 3 of those matches. Mizzou down 15-0 early on. They end up losing the first 4 matches of this meet. Gage Walker loses 7-4 Ethan Perryman. Cade Moore gets pinned by ISU backup Garrett Grice. That was a bit of a shocker. Josh Edmond wrestling a really good match. He's up late. He makes one mistake. That allows Jacob Frost to get a match-winning takedown. Edmond loses 9-8. Logan Joffrey, again, wrestling a really good match, makes one mistake. Panero Johnson gets to a low double leg shot, takes down Joffrey. That's the difference, 4-1 decision. At this point, Mizzou's down 15-0. Jay Conway is ranked around the fringe, around like 30th right now. He's unranked in some polls, and he's going up against number 8, Cody Chittum. Not expected to win it. He does not have a strong first period, but flips a switch, second and third, dominates, and he beats Chittum 9-3. Momentum starting to turn. Cam Steed takes the mat. Aiden Riggins, Iowa State does not have their starter here. He pins him. Now it's 15-9. That leads to Keegan O'Toole, who's back. He's facing Caden Schmidt. And O'Toole, in his final match at Hearns, on his bobblehead day, gets his 100th career victory in college via a pin to tie it up 15-15. And at that point, we get to the biggest match of the meet.
Did you get a bobblehead?
Yeah.
You did?
Yes. Down away.
So
2
exciting.
top 10 wrestlers, Colton Hawks, Evan Bachman. In the Intermat rankings, they're right next to each other. Bachman ends up winning that one 1-0. 197. Mizzou kind of has to have this one. Jesse Cassatt, Nate Schoen. Another narrow loss, 4-2. Cassatt loses. It's end up 21-15. And Seth Nitzel goes out, gets a really good win against a ranked wrestler in Daniel Herrera. Herrera's ranked 26th in the nation by the NCAA coaches poll. Nitzel beats him 8-3, but by that point, too little too late. Mizzou ends up losing by 3 due to those narrow losses in the 3 matches that I talked about.
Thank you. Then we're gonna stick with the mats, but now we're on gymnastics mats. Dylan and I, because Dylan was there too, doing stuff where you were there too. Oh, you were there. I saw you. We were all there. We were all at the greatest gymnastics meet ever. Oh my God. I had a conversation with Matthew and completely forgot that he was there.
Worried about the wrong type of mat, apparently.
Anyway, we were all at the greatest gymnastics meet ever. Oh my gosh. It was the most fun and nerve-wracking and just craziest thing. So, Mizzou, now number 8 in the country, took on Georgia, who was number 12 in the country at the time. I think now they're number 11 or 10. I think they're 10 now. And they came away victorious. 197-425 to 197-35. And if you're thinking that's real damn close, it was real damn close. It quite literally came down to Kennedy Griffin's floor exercise as the anchor in rotation 4. It was Georgia's Lily Smith versus Kennedy Griffin. And oh my gosh, it was, I feel like I should actually start at the beginning here with the fact that Mizzou was able to get their best score of the season when Shannon told us afterwards, if that meet had been earlier in the week, there would have been no meet. They would have had to forfeit because so many people were sick that they would not have been able to compete. But he was making, and the cool thing about Mizzou having as much depth that they have is that he was pulling people in and out of those lineups like crazy and just tossing somebody else in, and you wouldn't even realize it based on the scores that they were getting. So like Jocelyn Moore did vault, and then I guess she was not feeling well. So they pulled her out of bars. They pull her out of bars. They stick Addie Lawrence, who had done bars previously, in her spot. What does Addie Lawrence do? No big deal. Gets a career best 9.9. Like, what? On floor, Jocelyn Moore again. They pull her off of floor. In her place, they stick Kaya Tonskinen, who had only previously done one exhibition routine and scored a 9.75. What does she do? Come in, no big deal, a 9.9. Like, absolutely insane. But you never would have known that they were dealing with all of the sickness concern because their scores did not show it. I will say vault still not the best. It was better. It was definitely better. Now that is one thing where having injuries did they just don't have the depth on vault that they have in other areas. So like Jocelyn didn't do as well. Jocelyn's sick. She still did the vault. They pulled Elise out the last minute. I think she might have tweaked something during warm-ups. Nate Salzman and I were watching and we're like, something seems weird there. She like pulled off weird on one of her jumps. So I thought maybe that was why, because she did come back and do floor later and then got her season high 9.925. So obviously shouldn't that hurt or isn't that sick? But they did pull her out, and that's somebody who consistently does pretty well on vault. So you could kind of tell there were people in vault that aren't normally in vault, and they did as best as they could. You know, whatever.
I mean, that being said, I think it was their first time having above a 49 in like 3 or 4 meets.
Yeah.
Something like that.
This was like their third best score of the season.
Yeah.
And yeah, they'd been going sub 49s for several weeks.
And that's
so to get the 49.175 was
like watching it, I was going, all right, they've been phenomenal in all 3 other events. Like if they can just hang on and just have a decent score on vault, like they're going to be set up for just such a good meet. And I mean, that's what happened in the end. So.
I mean, I talked with Nate actually afterwards. I asked him, they got a high score? They must have had a season high on one of the events. And he was like, nope. They just, every single event, they pulled their weight. And sure enough, it was a season high.
Yeah, it was third highest on vault, second highest on floor, second highest on bars, second or third highest on beam. They just were like consistent on on everything else. It was awesome. It was awesome. My other favorite part was the fact that Amari's brother, her choreographer, like he actually did work with her via FaceTime to do her choreography for her routine, was there, like right there, like literally right there at the edge of the mat watching her. So like after the meet, Nate's like, Amari, like, what was it like to have your brother, like, not like literally in your corner? And she just like, she couldn't stop smiling. Because she told us early on the season that she was dedicating this season to her family. I know she had a couple of deaths in the family over the summer within the past year. So she'd been having some trouble with that, but she decided like she was going to dedicate this season to her family. And then the fact that like her brother was there and right there cheering her on. I mean, you could like, her floor routine is already like incredible, but like you could tell like with her brother being there, like it was like just an extra step. And I can't, she still only got a 995. Pissed me off. We don't know for sure what's wrong with Sky Blakely, who would have been an Olympic alternate, except for that she had gotten hurt, I think, before the Olympic trials last year. She may have tore her Achilles. That's not good. Did I say Sky? It's Sloan. Sloan is the one that got hurt. They're both on the team. One's hurt, one's not. Actually, both of them have been hurt in the past, though. Sloan is out. That's a big loss for them, but they also like their team is they have so much depth that I don't know how much difference it'll going to make. And because it's at Gainesville, we should expect abnormally high scores for Florida because that is what they are known for. It's not their fault.
I was wondering for the NQS, Mizzou still has that 196.750 that they need to drop, right?
Yes. So the way that will work is this week, as long as they get a 197, that 196 score's gone.
Yep.
But say like they get 197.5, which would be their highest.
Then
that would take off the 197.5. But then they would now count the 197.425,
which would replace
still takes off the 196.
Which would be which is why I'm like, because I mean, if they have their best score of the season against Florida, like that is going to turbocharge their NQS. If you can replace a 196.75 with a 197.425, like they could maybe shoot up the rankings like one or two spots.
I like that, Matt.
It should. I talked about that a little bit in my recap, that kind of how that math is working. So as of right now, they're still number 8. For a second they were like number 6.
Yeah.
But then Cal hadn't gone yet. UCLA hadn't gone yet, and Michigan State, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe another West Coast school hadn't gone yet going into Sunday. Yeah. So preemptively, I was like, they're number 6.
I remember using the calculator app on my phone at Hearns and looking like the road to national rankings. Like, all right, where are they going? Where are they going? What's their NQS?
Yeah.
Which, the nice thing is like they've already gotten a lot of really good road and neutral scores. So like,
oh yeah, and like playing such a road heavy schedule.
Yeah.
They will never run out of road scores to use. Yeah. So yeah, they're number 8 in that. They did move back, even though they did better in vault. Other teams did better in vault, so now they actually moved back to 17 from 14 in vault. I had to remind my mom's like, I don't understand these road to national scores, and I was like, well, it's not like rankings. I was like, I'd explain like, it's like literally based on how their score is compared to other people's scores. There's no subjectivity to that. Like, it's just, it is what it is. They're actually the highest on bars. They're number 3 or 4 on bars. No, I can't remember. Yeah, they're number 3 or 4 on bars now. They're number 5 on floor, 8 on beam, and then 17 on vault. So gotta get those vault scores up. Amari did say something interesting about the about their like vaulting, the way that they kind of structure their practices a little bit almost. Whereas she's like, you can't just worry about the end part. You can't just worry about the sticking part. You have to worry about all the other parts before that. Like if you don't have a good round off onto the horse, you can't stick. If you don't get enough height, you're not going to stick. Like, so she said that they're more trying to focus on those other things that will get them to the stick rather than just focusing so much on the stick, which I think is a really, really good strategy because a couple weeks ago, Elise Tisler fell on vault and it looked like it was because she was trying too hard to stick. So if you take that pressure off a little bit and you just worry about the ways to get there, then perhaps that will, then they'll see some improvements. So that's all I've got for gymnastics. All we got left is diamond sports, friends. Baseball.
Mizzou baseball is a thing.
It's a thing.
That is playing in Columbia now because they had them open. And they scored more runs than the other team, which was not easy because they allowed 10 runs, but they got 14.
So Lindenwood.
There you go. To Lindenwood. In fact, they allowed 4 runs in the first 0.1 of an inning in the game. I remember I looked at the lineup going, look, all due respect to Victor Crystal, he's young. This is what happens with young pitchers. But he got lit up against Alabama State in that 10-2 loss, which Mizzou goes 2 out of 3 at the Andre Dawson Classic. They end up losing to Alabama State 10-2. Really bad loss for the program, right? Victor Crystal allowed 5 of those 10. And he gets the start against Lindenwood. I'm going, okay. Like he struggled with command during fall ball.
Like baptism by fire.
He's young. He's inconsistent. He struggles with command, right? How is this going to go? It went really bad. Like it went very bad. Mizzou is still working around with their rotation. I'm not quite 100% sure what the deal is. They've had like 4 or 5 guys who've been really solid. And we haven't seen Daniel Whistler in a while. It's possible that's due to injury, other things, but there are 3 or 4 guys who it's pretty clear, okay, they should be in the rotation. Yet Mizzou hasn't necessarily like solidified that yet. But Lindenwood, they get down by 4. Brady Piccarelli is the one who leads the charge.
MVP,
he homers twice. 3 home runs in his first 5 collegiate at bats. He's a true freshman. He ends up going 5 for 5 in this game with, I think, hold on, how many runs? 3 runs, 6 runs batted in. And from what I recall, it's the first 5-hit game by a Mizzou player, any Mizzou player, not a true freshman, any Mizzou player since 2018.
Wow.
Pretty impressive stuff. Cameron Benson, really good too. 4 for 5, 1 RBI, 1 run. Brock Daniels, 2 for 4. He gets an RBI. Peyton Baszler, who I was starting to wonder, all right, is he going to be a regular part of this team, in the future? Didn't get a lot of playing time at the Andre Dawson Classic. Somebody who we expected to be a starter fairly regularly entering the season. He bounces back. He goes 2 for 4. He gets 2 runs and an RBI as well, so solid stuff from him. Mizzou takes the lead in the 5th inning. Lindenwood immediately ties it the next half, but Mizzou retakes the lead the next half after that and scores 5 runs in the 7th to really put this one away.
That
So right
recap
now-
that you wrote was like crazy because it was like you think it's over, but it's not.
No, it is never over. And I mean, Lindenwood had the bases loaded in the 9th. They had a run walk in on the bases loaded in the 9th before Mizzou got it done. There is no lead that is safe with this team, right? So a little bit similar to last year. There have been a lot of high-scoring games early on in non-con. Now, the issue is, to me, it seems like the pitching, both starting and in the bullpen, is weaker this year than last year. And the offense really cooled off when it got to SEC play. Now, I think the offense is better this year. But the question is, does the improvement in the offense offset maybe a step back in the pitching? I don't necessarily know if it does. It's still early on in the year, but there are certainly some warning signs early on with this Mizzou baseball team. There's some talented players, right? There have been some positives, but this team has had a lot of setbacks and several bad losses to begin the season.
And this weekend they have Evansville.
Yep. Evansville, who is not having a good year so far. They're 1-6.
Love to hear it.
But at the same time, like, this was the Cinderella team of last year's NCAA tournament. They upset, I think it was Wake Forest in regionals, and then they took Tennessee, eventual national champions, to 3 games in the Supers. So that was a really good team last year. That was a dangerous mid-major team. They have not looked the same this year, but you never know.
Softball. Now, since I've been doing a lot of talking, I'm going to let Dylan do some talking here. He too was at the press conference on Monday and actually could hear all the questions that were asked because he was there in person. He was there in person while I was on Zoom, and they have yet to figure out a way to get it so the people who are on Zoom can actually hear what's being asked, unless it's Natalie Jones who talks loud. So I could hear her, and I could hear your questions, Dylan. But most of the other people I couldn't. So yeah, what would you like to share about what Larissa's lessons, to borrow from our topic of our takeaways piece, which will go out tomorrow as soon as I finish my part of it. What would you like to share with the group?
Yeah. I think I'll start with the thing that definitely has been on Larissa's mind the most, and that is the early season and the travel issues. So we missed the podcast and Larissa's lessons last week, and that our good friend Natalie Jones actually went quite viral for Larissa Anderson's answer to her press conference last week, where she basically said, we should not be playing games in February. There's still snow on the ground. There's travel issues. We can't practice outside. Like, logistically, it's a nightmare. And so that garnered a lot of national attention. She actually said this before. I think she's officially opened the statement, but there were like a lot of coaches reaching out and being like, this might have some traction in like an idea to.
Well, she is the NFCA president. It should come with some sort of.
She carries a lot of clout among coaches.
Yeah.
Exactly. She was like, it's nationwide. Like, she talked about it later and was like, a perfect schedule in her mind would be you start your pregame stuff early March, you're playing games late March, early April, and so you're wrapping up the World Series around the 4th of July, which would be cool. Student athlete calendars, things like that. There's definitely questions, but I think it'd be fun. I mean, it makes a lot more sense than what Mizzou's got now, as they were finally able to practice outside this week instead of being inside, which definitely is a huge difference, trying to play on dirt than playing in the Divine Pavilion, which is all just turf, artificial work, and playing against the best teams in the country like UCLA, Oregon. That stuff makes a difference. So another thing that she was quite frustrated with is the time differences that you have to go through, because they spent 2 weeks in Florida on East Coast time, was back in Columbia for maybe 2 nights in Central, and then had to immediately ship out to the West Coast to Mary Nutter, which that sort of fast turnaround. I mean, Larissa Anderson was like, it might be a little bit of an old take, but travel's hard. Like, jet lag is definitely a real thing that affects athletes. I mean, like, Mizzou, I think, is still very lucky, and the SEC is still compact. You hear it all over the country about, like, the Big Ten and the ACC going from west to east, east to west, how it's starting to mess with a lot of these Olympic athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So this tournament, it's a real grind out there, and it kind of showed at Mary Nutter. 2-3 on the weekend, lost to Minnesota, who, for all the losses,
they had no business losing to.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a bad loss.
That's a tough one. That was a Minnesota team that had not really impressed before that. But I mean, and eventually those games, it's bound to happen. But you look at last year, I think they were 13-2. You might correct me if I'm wrong. Through 3 tournaments through Mary Nutter.
It was amazing. Yeah, they started out so strong.
Now they're 8-8. Yes, they've got a lot of new pieces. Yes, they had a lot of returning talent leave, but you can't look at those 2 results playing in very similar tournaments against similar competition and be like, there's got to be something there. Hopefully this week is at least a little bit of a reset, not against competition-wise, but against...
No. I think at one point she was like, why did I do this?
Why did I do this? But
sounds like Brian Smith talking about the schedule from earlier this year.
But they're playing in the Central Time. They're not leaving until, I guess, today when the podcast goes out. Hopefully on Thursday, they get to take a bus. They stay in the Central Time. So, like, travel-wise, it's starting to at least shape up. They play their home opener in less than a week, which will be fun against UMKC. So they're not taking as many long trips, which you hope, and getting more of those practice reps, especially because if coaches love nothing more, they love practice. So I think that there's still a lot of room to be desired. But again, the way that the softball schedule is set up in this early stages, not really conducive to trying to build up those freshmen. It's like, oh, yeah, shoot, you got to play. Go play against.
And she's talked about that a lot, about getting them used to game speed has been really difficult, especially when you haven't been able to play on dirt and not practice at all. Like, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. It's kind of funny because the Larissa's lessons piece that I was going to write last week, and then I got very sick, so that never came out, was called Peaks and Valleys, and still works for this week. So it is still going to be called Peaks and Valleys, because she actually mentioned that on Monday. That is how she said that she described the team's performance. She said she'd like to see some more rolling hills. She's the biggest thing right now is that, like, she is seeing some growth in some areas. Like, the defense has gotten better. Like, they're not committing 2 errors a game. Like, it was so bad for a little bit there that, like, my piece last week before I scrapped it was tentatively titled something like The Fielding House of Horrors. I have since scrapped that because it's not as horror filled anymore. But so, like, she said that she's seen some growth in some in some positive areas, but they're not putting all those pieces together. So they don't have all 3 facets of the game together at the same time, and that's hurting them. They're kind of hurting themselves by not being able to get all, kind of like with gymnastics, when they can't get all 4 pieces together. So similar to that, they still have some things to iron out. It also is kind of weird because last week she said Kara Daly is not the answer at shortstop, and she will not be playing shortstop. And she played shortstop all weekend, and then it sounds like she is now the answer at shortstop. But I think the way I took it was that Daly wasn't showing enough at shortstop early on to give Larissa any sort of confidence in her ability to be a shortstop. Whereas I guess over the weekend, she did show she was able to make routine plays. She just wants her to be able to make routine plays. And then also had I saw some highlight reel type catches and plays that she made. So I guess that she is going to be the shortstop because I don't know what else they're going to do.
That's the thing is she also talked about this is that she's still playing with a lot of lineups. She's not sure who's going to start everywhere. Like we're going to put it in the piece, but Kaylee Langer earned the starting center field job over the offseason. Still a good fielder. Over in the batting.
Zeros.
Yeah,
zeros because this is her batting average.
It was just a rough performance. And so Hayden Sokolowski, the Oklahoma State transfer, stepped up, got some key hits, some key RBIs, and so that's a position in doubt. Abby Hay has really been struggling, so Larissa made the move for Madison Walker to go to first and then put Sanaya Hill over at third, the freshman.
Who also has been doing very well.
RBI, like some of these top performers, apart from your like Carrie Daly's and Julia Crenshaws and Stefania Brascatos, starting to come off the bench. So that's really the thing is that Mizzou still has the talent. Like Kaylee Langer and Abby Hay, like they're not for sure losing their starting spots. They're still great players, but there's a lot of questions of who do you put where, who goes exactly where in the start of the lineup. I really like Julia Crenshaw leading off, actually. Yeah. But it's still like you can tell that Larissa's not quite confident in who she's going to put out there for her starting nine and where they all fit into the batting order, which is kind of, I guess, holding this team back because they haven't quite found the identity. That puzzle's looking really, really barren right now, I guess you could say, from our perspective.
Well, and even like while she was very complimentary of Julia Crenshaw, there are still things that she definitely wants Julia Crenshaw to work on. She is leaving a lot of people on base. Mm-hmm. And she has 9 RBIs, but I swear that coach said something about like her not producing enough.
Which is crazy because I think she leads the team in batting average. Like
she leads the team in batting average and OPS. She has the most runs scored. She's the most hits. Abrascato has the most doubles. She's got 5 doubles. Carrie Daly leads in RBIs with 11. Madison Walker, though her batting average looks garbage, 208. She continues to, I think coach said she hits the ball really hard, but a lot of times it just goes at people and people make a lot of plays on her. She's leading the team in home runs with 5. But Hayden in her limited time, 455 batting average, 1.116 OPS, 5 hits, a double, an RBI, 545 slugging percentage. Couple of walks, not very many strikeouts, and 11 at bats. And then Sanaya Hill, who you mentioned, who's had 15 at bats, 333 batting average. She strikes out a little bit too much, but she's also a freshman, so I'll allow it. But I mean, she's had a couple of doubles, RBIs, hits. Like she's been a good addition to the team. So this weekend they face Nebraska twice. Yay. So they face Oklahoma first. They face Oklahoma on Friday at 3.
Oklahoma State.
I'm sorry. Oklahoma State. Friday at 3. They're 8-4 this season. They're on a 4-game winning streak. Then they face Wichita State in the second game of the doubleheader.
Good mid-major. Very good.
Shockers, 9-5 on the season. They have been doing very well. And I've played a bunch of SEC teams so far. South Dakota State's 5-7. They play them Saturday morning. They are on a 6-game losing streak. Love to see it. And also, like, they're on a 6-game losing streak against teams that aren't very good. Like, they lost to Oklahoma State, obviously a very good team. But the other teams that they lost to aren't, like, powerhouses. And then they play Nebraska Saturday at 3 and Sunday at 12. Nebraska is 12-4. They are on a 3-game win streak. They've beaten Tennessee. They beat Baylor just like Mizzou did. They also lost to UCLA, and by more runs than Mizzou lost to UCLA too. So you can hang your hat on that. And they also lost to Duke, who notably Mizzou beat. So is Mizzou better than Nebraska? They're not better than Jordy Ball, but
Let's find out.
I mean, I know we already said it, and she said it, but like Larissa Anderson, what were you doing with this schedule? Like, oh my God, every week you're just like top 15, top 15, top 15. It's just.
I did find it interesting that when they were talking about how they are going to play in this tournament like every year, and it just will move from like between Stillwater or Wichita.
It's Nebraska, Wichita State, Mizzou, and then they bring in invitational pieces.
Another team.
South
Yeah,
Dakota State.
and that they like plan to keep doing that moving forward.
Because they played in Lincoln last year, so it'll be in Columbia next year.
Sounds like volleyball had a tournament where it was them, South Dakota, Louisville, and Northern Kentucky, and they just 4 years just changed each year where it was.
Kind of cute.
And then the last thing I will say about the pitching, I'm still trying to think of a clever heading for my pitching section on this piece. Right now it just says pitching ... need a clever heading.
You should just leave it like that.
That's like the pitching needs an answer.
And you know what? I'm just going to read what Larissa said because it actually was really good. With that encompasses the problems with the pitching right now. She said the biggest thing with them is that they have to learn to be a pitcher and the craft of pitching, and that they're just throwing right now. She thought that McCann's had some really good outings, especially against UCLA. She was extremely competitive. She gave them a hard time. There were a lot of swings and misses. So it was really good progress to see how competitive she was against UCLA. With Cece, she seems to be having a hard time recovering from mistakes in the game, whether or not they are her mistakes or the defense's mistakes. Whatever that issue is, her getting back on track after that happens. And she said that they want to make sure that she said, we're giving the momentum to the other team and then we're not responding and recovering when something like that happens. Because as she said, like Marissa and Cece are both rise ball pitchers. Rise ball pitchers are going to give up home runs. But a solo home run, she is fine with. But for the love of God, stop giving up like grand slams and 3-run homers. Like I had made some notes that I'm going to put in here. Like there were a lot of multi-run home runs given up.
Yeah.
And that has to stop because it just puts too much pressure on everybody else. So
the last thing I'll say for softball is the pitching, you can tell the depth is struggling because obviously you had the 3 that are still in the lineup.
Taylor Pinnell.
Plus Lauren Krings. And so you had 4 pitchers that you could put in and around. It kind of protected everybody, especially with how consistent Krings was. Now you don't have that option. It's just your top 3. Natalie Touche, Courtney Donahue, JC Cruzet. No one's quite stepped up into that next role. So they're
not exactly putting the fear in people.
There's really only 3 pitchers, and right now all of them are still working through stuff. Again, there's not any of that senior leadership, so it's kind of figure out who belongs where and can anybody else step up.
We did learn that Taylor Pinnell can be a starter.
Good to know. Very important.
Yeah. I watched that game, and those announcers were like gobsmacked by the fact that she was like, oh my God, she's above all the pitches that she's ever thrown. Oh my God, that's more strikeouts than she's ever had.
Well, I mean,
oh my God, she's still going. She's still in. How is this like? They could not believe it.
I mean, she wasn't having a great start to the year as a closer, so I mean, you might as well give it a shot. And turns out it was a great idea.
And,
I mean, if she's the midweek answer and then you throw her in as a closer in SEC series, not a bad solution, I will say.
Because I'm not sure that, like, I think they're going to need her, like, to be more than a closer, honestly. They just don't.
No depth.
They don't have enough depth there to just have her be a dedicated closer. And she did a really good job. She looked great. Love to see it. On that note, we have gone far over the time that Levi's going to be so mad at me.
We've reached the depth of this podcast.
So, good discussion, all. Head to rocknation.com. We wrote a crap ton of stuff. See, no swearing this time. We wrote a crap ton of stuff. You should read it all. And we got more stuff coming out. And I know we talked about possibly doing a whole nother like basketball podcast to talk about some coaching things that we're looking for. Maybe we'll invite in some outside guests to participate. Yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I know that I had one comment from somebody last week who asked me, I told Matthew about this really happened. Somebody reached out to me on Twitter and was like, is there a new majority rules this week? This was last week. And I was like, no, but thank you for listening. I was like, oh my God, we have a fan, and it wasn't somebody who's like my friend or my family.
We hope you're listening this week.
I know.
Leave us a nice comment on YouTube.
I forgot your name, person who reached out about that. But this is for you, sir. So thank you. We'll try and not go as long next time. No promises. I thought this was going to be a shorter one, but then, Robin says she's not coming back, and it just kind of...
We always say it's going to be a shorter one.
I know.
Yeah, I think we're also three of the biggest culprits when it comes to yapping. I think we have too many awesome points. What can we say?
If Robin wouldn't have said that she was leaving, it would have been shorter. We always get like a juicy news nugget that causes it to go off. We didn't even go off the rails today. Like, we didn't even have any extraneous conversation. I mean, we are right now, but like everything was on topic. So anyway, on that note, goodbye, everyone. MIC.
ZOU.
Thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.